color perception is very interesting, and it's there is some parts that are a little bit complex to understand, but not difficult. So we already understood that neuronal activity is not perception, and that we saw, for example, that our feeling of 3 dimensions, it's a sensation, it doesn't exist. We also saw that our system distorts the physical input, the physical world around us for various reasons in various situations. So color is probably the most extreme example of an inner interpretation of something that doesn't exist. And actually, so it's extreme because we cannot imagine our perception of the world around us without colors. And black and white is color also. They are colors. And more than that, they are loosely connected to the physical world. They are loosely connected to the physical stimuli that reach our retina. So we are going to cover, we are going to talk about light and some technical stuff, and then the Trichromatic Theory, and afterwards the color Opponency theory. So first of all, if you look at this picture, I'm colorblind, by the way, but I have trained, so I think there won't be problems. What can you see? What can you see better? The same picture with or without colors? I don't. I know these are red berries or something, but I hardly see the difference. Although I do see colors, and I do see. In the end, when I talk about color blindness, I'll talk a little bit more about it. But for most of you, I suppose, you can discern the berries from the leaves much better when you have colors. And that's probably how we evolved to perceive colors, because it enhances our ability to discern between different textures, different materials. And it mostly works because different materials, usually they have different pigments, and different pigments, they react differently to different wavelengths of electromagnetic energy, which is light. So this is light. You've already seen it many times from the entire spectrum that reaches the planet Earth. We only see a small range. So this is the range that we see between 400, 380 to 720, I think. But we hardly see those two extremes. And this is a linear gradual scale. But the way we perceive colors is like this. Now, this is strange because, first of all, we perceive these colors, you guys perceive, no, but I also perceive these colors as much more similar than, let's say, this and this, right? Or between this and this, there is a larger perceptual difference between this and this. So how come, where does it come from? And there is another thing here, if someone can find, what do we have here that we don't have here? Anyone? And I'm not talking about this white hole. Anyone can find here something that doesn't exist in the physical world? So it's this color, right? The purple. This is purple, correct me if I'm wrong. So this doesn't exist. There is no wavelength that is purple. Purple is a combination of wavelengths. But we perceive it as a completely discrete, different color, and we'll understand it later. And actually, we perceive an infinite different combinations of wavelength that we cannot discern that for us it's the same color. Okay, so all colors together, when all wavelengths, when they are at the same time a light that emits all wavelengths of our range together, we perceive the light as white, like sunlight. So, okay, electromagnetic energy. So you probably remember from high school that there is the concept of conservation of energy, meaning that energy is always transferred from kinetic energy to heat to light, electric energy. But if it dissipates into another kind of energy. So the same for light energy, for electromagnetic energy, which are waves of photons that when they reach a surface, any kind of matter, they are either absorbed or they are reflected. So the amount of energy that light waves emit depends on its frequency. So the lower the frequency, the shorter the waves, the more energy, the larger the amount of photons per time is emitted or absorbed, and the larger the less. So that's why, for instance, for radio waves, shorter radio waves, they can be received, transmitted to further distances than long waves. For instance, FM are long waves. So different materials, they absorb this energy differently depending on what is made of. So one of the many things determine what happens to this energy when it bounces or when it reaches a surface. Density is one of them. Another one is the pigment that this matter has. So that's why UV light that we do not see, which is shorter than the light that we see, it reaches, it's absorbed by the atoms, the molecules of our skin, and if it's too much UV light, it starts to change the composition of the tissue of the skin, and it causes cancer, among other things. X-rays, which are smaller, they can penetrate tissue even further. So that's how X-rays work. So X-rays, they are short enough to pass through tissue, soft tissue, but denser tissue like bones, they absorb X-rays. So how X-rays work, you emit X-rays through the body, and on the other side of the person, there is a plate with emulsion that is photosensitive to X-rays. So when the X-rays transverse soft tissue, it will reach and bleach the emulsion, but it cannot cross bones or denser tissue. So it's that's also the reason why X-rays are harmful, because our tissue absorb it, and if it's more than a certain threshold, it starts to mess with the molecules, and I think even genetic procedures inside the cells. In the first years when it was discovered, I don't remember when, until they found out that X-rays is harmful, scientists and also children, they started to lose hair and all kinds of crazy stuff. So CT, I told you, is also X-rays. And PET scan is gamma rays, which is even shorter than X-rays, meaning that it enters even further into the tissue and it's more damaging. But you can see more things. So, as I said, so not only density, but another difference, which is mostly relevant for our lecture today, is that different pigments absorb light waves, light energy differently. So, as you know, a black surface under the sun will get hot. A black car under the sun will get extremely hot. Compared to a white surface, because black pigments, they absorb much more energy than white pigments, which reflect most. So this absorption of this energy, it has to go somewhere. It becomes heat in the case of a black surface. Spectral power distributions. This is the definition of the composition of a illuminant, a source of light that emits some kind of light, is composed by many types of wavelength, of different wavelength, and this is gradual, so it's infinite numbers of different wavelengths, right? So sunlight is more or less the same amount of all the wavelength. Tungsten, which is tungsten light, which is the filament bulbs that we used to have, has a different composition, mostly warmer, what we perceive as warmer colors, more to the red and yellow part. We don't use tungsten anymore because it's less efficient, meaning when the filament, the thing inside the bulb, when electric energy passes through it, it transforms part of the energy into light, and part into heat. That's why it gets so hot. LED is more efficient because for the same amount of electricity that passes through, it transforms much less energy into heat and much more energy into light. But for different colors. So when we buy bulbs, they are defined by color temperature in Kelvin. This is a scale. It's the transcription of a theoretical ideal black body radiator. When you heat to different temperatures, it radiates light in different compositions of wavelengths. So that's only a transcription. So a very hot radiator, we will emit much more energy and white light compared to a little bit less hot radiator, which is the light that we usually prefer at home. Feels more cozy, I don't know. I am very sensitive to the color of light. I hate when neon lights and white light. Okay, so spectral power distribution, SPD, is relevant for any source of light. It can be the illuminant, the source itself, or it can be light that is reflected from any surface, any reflectant that transmits the energy. So, so most of the light that reaches our retina is mediated by a surface. Our retina doesn't, we know top down by knowledge, but our system, our retina cannot discern between a source of light or light that is reflected. So different surfaces absorb any surface, both absorb and both reflects light in different, depending on the pigment and its composition, in different ways. But there isn't any material, any matter that only reflects. Even the best mirror, it absorbs a certain amount of light, and also there isn't even the black. There is an entire field in physics that it has a lot of applied uses that they try to improve the blackness of matter that absorbs more and more and reflects less, but some light is always reflected. And also translucent material absorb certain ranges of wavelength and lets other wavelength pass through. So our retina, our cones have our cones and all our photoreceptors in our retina, cones and rods, they have specific pigments that absorb specific wavelength of light. We'll see it soon. But before, so these are reflecting curves of different pigments. So let's say a green pigment will absorb most of the short waves, even more long waves, and reflect much more of these medium short waves. But it doesn't reflect everything. It absorbs, I don't know, 35%, and it reflects all the wavelength, but much less. a tomato is red because it absorbs most of the short waves and it reflects much more the long waves. Black paper reflects equally all wavelengths, but it reflects only, I don't know, 5%. This is an ideal black paper. White paper reflects most of the light, but absorbs equally, but absorbs between 20 and 15% of all light. And this is determined by the pigments on the material. So it's range and amount, okay? Okay, when we mix lights, so it's usually defined as the additive property of mixing lights. So if we mix all lights, we have white light, like sunlight. But if we mix only blue light, but it's not blue light, let's not, blue is our internal translation, interpretation of shortwave light. And in nature, we don't have, even in labs, we hardly have a pure wavelength. We can have a narrow band, but most light in nature is a range of short waves. So what happens is that if shortwave light and medium long wave light is emitted on a white surface that reflects both ranges, we perceive white. So how come that we perceive the same? We cannot differentiate between sunlight that have all the range, all the wavelength, all the ranges, and the mixture of only two narrow bands of short and medium long waves, because they linearly add, and we'll see soon how it works. Now, the book and most textbooks, they use this confusing terminology of blue light, and it confuses because, as I said before, blue is our internal interpretation of shortwave. Okay. So we said that when we add light, it adds, because the more waves, all the waves, if they are reflected, they are added to the same light. But when we mix pigments, paints, it's the opposite. They are subtractive. Why? Because each pigment will absorb a certain range. So blue paint will absorb the short waves. Yellow paint will absorb the medium long waves. If we mix them together, the mix will absorb both the short waves and the long medium waves, and it will reflect only the medium.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Isn't paint absorbs long wave instead of short wave so that we can see the short wave?
Sorry, say it again.
Isn't the case that the blue paint absorbs long wave and reflects short wave so that we can see the short wave instead of the long wave?
Yes, I said the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Yes. I meant to say that. So blue reflects the short, and yellow reflects the medium long. So if you mix together, it will reflect, it will absorb, the yellow part will absorb the short, and the blue part will absorb the long, so only the medium is reflected. If you mix all the colors together, you will have black paint, which is the opposite. If you mix all the lights together, you have white light. All right? What happens if you have shortwave light bouncing on a red paper? Shortwave is our blue. What, ideally, theoretically, what would you see? Anyone? So
Black?
theoretically, sorry?
Some sort of black?
Yes, you will not see anything, theoretically, ideally, but because there is no pure light, something you see dark. Okay. This afterwards, you can go through all this thing if you want to exercise. So let me, this also answer is C. So afterwards in the PDF you can see. And what time is it? It's 4. Okay, so I'll give you this one. I'll give you 2 minutes to answer. In the meantime, great. Anyone have a different answer from C? Okay. So we have the trichromatic theory and the opponent process model mechanism. So let's begin with the trichromatic. It was proposed a long time ago, before in the beginning of before psychophysics. So they discovered that we have 3 types of cones that have 3 slightly different pigments, which are called opsin. It's 3 versions of opsin. It's that they react slightly different to different wavelengths. And the idea is that the combination of the reaction of these 3 types of cones, they result in a different pattern of firing that later cells along the visual pathway can discern, according to the combination of the pattern, can discern between different compositions of light. If the light is the same, so it can be interpreted as different textures, what we call colors. Now, the problem is that the physical composition of light cannot explain our perception, and we will understand it now. This is very important. The color matching experiment, which is the center of all this story. So what we have here is like this. We have a probe here on the left, which is a narrow band wavelength of mostly 500, this is millimeters, it's not millimeters, it's nanometers, okay? This is a mistake. So 500 nanometers, which we usually see as green. And the participant has 3 knobs, each one of them with a different, also narrow band of light. And the participant is asked to, these knobs, they control the intensity of each one of those light sources, which are combined together. They illuminate the same white surface, and by changing the intensity of these 3 narrow bands, the participant tries to match the same color of the probe. Now, the thing is that here there is no 500 nanometers light, and still it can easily be done. It can easily be done by any combination of 3 pure sources, three primaries. By changing the intensity, we can match the exact same color in infinite ways. How is it done? And these combinations, any combination of different wavelengths that match the same perceptual experience, the same color, are called metamers. Okay, metamers are different compositions of wavelength that we perceive identically. So with any 3 primaries, we can match any possible color. And the combinations are linear, meaning that if you double the intensity of this one source, you can reach the same thing by doubling the intensity of the 3 of them, or quadrupling one and doubling another one, etc. Okay. The experiment goes like this. This is the test field, okay, and these are the 3 knobs, and the participant plays with them until it cannot see the difference. So how is it possible? So this is the main thing. We don't have, as it's written in the book, and that's the confusing part, we don't have blue, red, and green or yellow cones. Even different textbooks define the color of the cones differently. Cones don't have colors. Cones have preferences, slightly different preferences for different ranges of wavelength, and rods just the same. So this is in the retina. This is our only cones, but rods just the same. So rods, the difference is that they have rhodopsin instead of opsin as the pigment, which reacts a little bit different, but it doesn't matter. It's even in the middle of the range, and the distribution looks exactly the same. Each one of these types of receptors, they actually react to most of our range, but in different probabilities. So our long wave receptors, for if the light is around 560 nanometers, it will need less photons to fire, to react. But it will react exactly the same for a more intense 500 nanometers light. the photoreceptor itself doesn't know, cannot discern, doesn't care what is the wavelength. It cares only about the amount of energy that reaches its pigment. As we've seen, the difference between cones and rods is the size. That's why they are called like this. Their distribution. We have cones and rods all around our periphery. In our fovea, only cones. We have difference in conversion. We saw that. And we have different thresholds, which is a result not only of the way they converge, but also because it's different pigments. A rod needs a little bit less photons to bleach. Now, this is probability of firing. This is not the intensity of firing. So if a long wave receptor receives, as I said before, this amount of light, a small amount of light in its peak preference, it will fire just the same if it receives 3 times more photons of a wavelength that is far away from its preference. Okay? And once it bleaches, it bleaches. And then it takes minutes to regenerate. So one photon receiving 600 nanometers wave, half of the intensity of 480, it will fire just the same. So it's not only color that our receptors cannot discern, it's also intensity. These two options for one kind of receptor cannot be discerned, not only in color, but also in intensity. So let's go back to our fovea, which, so for now, we'll not talk about rods, only cones. And let's see how metamers occur. So if we have a light like this, with this composition, with this spectrum, the short wave receptors will fire this amount. This is the area that it likes. But this guy, look, this guy, it accepts all this range. So for this light, everything is, all this area is activating it. Here, this the medium wave receptors, they are receiving a combination of all this range with this intensity. The same for this. This light, which is a completely different composition of wavelength, will excitate, will bleach the same cones identically, because even though we don't have this wavelength, we have this peak in a much higher intensity. The same for this. Is it clear why we perceive the same color even though the wavelengths are completely different? The physical stimuli are completely different. Is it clear? Okay. So this combination, so the combination of wavelength is what matters. It doesn't matter which. Okay, I'm repeating myself, and that explains how our TVs work. Our TVs, they have small three kinds. Well, there are different versions, but they have the surface of our monitors and TVs, not all TVs, modern TVs. They have small lights with different colors, and the combination of the intensity of a small area of these, they can achieve any possible color that we perceive. Literally infinite possible combinations. A computer cannot emit sunlight, the same composition. But we cannot perceive the difference. Okay. Okay, in sum, colors don't exist. Our system cannot even differentiate the composition of wavelength that reach our retinas. We cannot even differentiate intensities. We can crudely, for given the same light following or bouncing on a given surface or given area, if the different materials, the different surfaces have different pigments, we can crudely differentiate between them. What about low light? We all know that at night we don't see colors. So, first of all, at night, below a certain threshold, we know that below a certain amount of photons reaching our retina, our cones do not react anymore. They don't receive the amount of energy per time to bleach, only rods. But the wavelength, the composition of light is identical. It's the same ranges of wavelength that reach our retina, but we don't perceive it. Well, the difference is because in daylight, we have the three types of cones that firing together later neurons in the visual pathway can identify different simultaneous patterns and differentiate between, eventually interpret different compositions. At night, we have only one. Even though our rods are more sensitive to light, and where is it? Where are our rods? Sorry. They are exactly in the middle of our range. Our rods, they are more sensitive, and they are sensitive to most of the range. One type of receptor, it doesn't matter which one, will either fire or not fire. So so the system doesn't have enough information to separate, to discern between a longer wavelength, a longer wavelength, or a weaker, shorter wavelength. Okay, where were we? And this is called the univariance principle, which means that a photon is a photon is a photon. Um, if we have only one type, so a 480 wavelength with 1,000 units of energy for the same time, and a 600, a different wavelength with the same amount, we will perceive this one, the 400, brighter, but we cannot differentiate in terms of quality or in terms of quantity. If the 600 nanometers wavelength is more intense, we will perceive as identical. Okay? Make sense? All right. Summing up, we have three different kinds of cones that have a slightly different difference in terms of the pigments inside it. And they have different reactions in terms of the threshold of energy in order to fire. So we can differentiate, given the same light, we can differentiate crudely between the composition, but only crudely. That's why we have metamers. If we have only if we perceive with only one type of receptor, we cannot differentiate neither intensity nor nor wavelength. All right. The second system that we have is, well, this is in some textbooks, I don't know if in ours, I don't remember, sometimes it's described as a different theory that but it's not conflictual. It's not it doesn't refute these two systems, these two mechanisms. They work together at different stages of our perception. We'll soon understand. So the idea is like this. We have, I don't see it, I'm reading. So this is blue, right? And this is green. What's the name of the color in the middle? So as I understand, it's called cyan. Between blue and red, there is a color that you guys also perceive, and it has a name. It's purple or magenta. Between red and yellow, you have orange. But between blue and yellow, as I understand, you normal people cannot define this color. It's either gray or something that doesn't have a name. Between red and green, also, there is no name for this thing, right? And I think that, well, actually, for me as a colorblind, this is a color that I perceive every day, and I know from experience to call it, if it's a bottle of Coke, I know it's red, but if it's something else, and sometimes I don't know. I have drawings from my childhood with all kinds of mixed up of, but these colors are things that you perceive in your daily, and this you don't. Okay. Now I'm going to show you this this screen for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to show you this. So fixate now for 30 seconds on this black dot. Don't move your eyes. This is very important. Don't move your eyes. Keep on fixating. I'll continue to talk a little bit. And then I will move to the next screen, to the gray one. And you will continue to look at the black dot. Don't move your eyes. And then you're going to see the after image. And you tell me which colors you see. Okay, now I'm going to move. Can you see the 6 squares with the opponent colors? Yes, anyone? Please answer me, say something. Yes, yes, okay, which colors? Have you realized which ones? So here, which color did you see here? You don't remember? Pink, pink. Here you saw pink. And here, let's try again. Look at this. And now, okay, here. So, okay, cyan. Well, I'll show you a stronger effect, which is like this. I will do the same thing. This is a gray, we all agree this is a gray, black and white picture, right? So this is a very strong, even it works for me also. Fixate here, don't move your eyes. Keep on looking on this window here, this center. Okay. And now keep on looking. I'm going to move to the next slide. Keep on looking. Okay, keep on, don't move your eyes. Keep on looking, fixating on the black dot. Keep on fixating. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 7, 11. I'm colorblind. And now. Crazy, huh? Yeah, this is a crazy one. This is a crazy one. And it's black and white. It's even for you know that this is black and white, but in a few seconds that you look at this, and it looks perfectly colorful, even for me. Yeah, this is a cool one. So how does it work? You remember that I told you that we have the system of lateral inhibition that is usually defined as a spatial-based lateral interaction between neurons, but it's also, but I told you that it's also a general perceptual, a general perceptual mechanism that enhances, polarizes something, the foreground, on the account of the background. And it can be along many different stages of our perception. So what happens is that apparently we have somewhere along our visual system pairs of opponent opponent colors for black and white, red and green, and blue and yellow. So here, red and green, you were supposed to see here red, and here you were supposed to see blue and yellow and green. It didn't work well, maybe because of the monitor. And this is exactly the same system. So probably because it intensifies the difference between, in the case of red and green, it facilitates our discernment of red stuff from green stuff. In our monkey evolution, it was an advantage. Blue and yellow, I don't know why, but that's how it. That's what happened. So this is one possible wiring, maybe in the level of the bipolar or ganglion cell. So it doesn't matter. So the blue and yellow, it's a little bit more complex. The thing is that it was found, I don't know where this, it's somewhere, I think in V4 cells, that this is their resting state baseline firing rate. And when shortwave light falls on their receptive field, they fire like crazy. And when medium long wave, they are strongly inhibited. So the same for the red and green cells. Okay? All right. How much time do we have? 15 minutes. Let me tell you a little bit about color blindness. Do you all know this? It's the Ishihara plate. It probably doesn't work on the computer screen, but it works when your ophthalmologist shows you its printed booklet. So there are a lot of different. You all know this thing, right? So the first time I was, I think I was 8 or 9 years old. I have a younger brother who is 1.5 years younger. And when he was 6 years old, he was he was lucky to have, I don't know why he deserved, but they gave him glasses. And I really wanted to also to wear glasses. And I remember that I was really disappointed that I could not, that my sight was 20/20. And more or less at the same years, my mother took me to the ophthalmologist, and he showed me, this thing. And then there was, I don't remember, the number 17, and I said 74. There was nothing, and I said, I see 7. Completely. And my mother started to get angry with me, like, stop it, because she was sure I was trying to somehow convince the ophthalmologist that I need glasses. And he said, no, he's answering exactly what a colorblind is supposed to answer. So how does it work? A trichromat, someone that has all the three kinds. So color blindness is a deficiency in one or more types of pigments in the cones. I don't know about the rods. It's usually in the cones, as far as I know. So it's a small, either the pigment itself, one of the opsins is a little bit different. So it's a gradual thing. It's not one kind and another kind. And there are different types depending on how much change and which type of the three versions of cones. It's a genetic mutation. It's a genetic mutation that is only in the X chromosome. So if you remember, we have females have X and Y, and X and X, and males have Y and X. So the color, the gene that determines the production of the pigments in the cones is this information is only, this gene is only on the X chromosome. And it's, how do you say it, recessive, meaning that if you have one X with a problem in this gene, and you have another X, if it's a female, you have one X with a deficient gene for color and a good one, the good one will determine the production of those pigments. For men, for male sex, you have only one X. So if this gene is deficient, the phenotype, the consequence will be color blindness. That's why we have, I think the ratio is 1:4 more men than women, because women have to have the problematic gene in both chromosomes, in both X's. And that's why it only passes through your mother. So my mother is not colorblind, which means that her father was colorblind because she received her two X's, one of the two X's from her mother, and the other X that my mother has is from the only X that her father has. So no. So maybe So maybe her mother was also not colorblind or colorblind, and her father was not. Well, never mind. But I couldn't receive it from my father. I could only receive from one of the X's of my mother. She's not colorblind. Okay. If my mother was colorblind, her father, my grandfather, must have been, because from her two X's, for her to be colorblind, she must have two deficient X's, and one of them came from her father. So her father must have been colorblind for her to be. Okay. So we have different kinds of, so monochromats are those that don't see color at all. It's very rare. Usually they are mostly blind. They have more, it's not only color blindness, they have a bunch of different deficiencies in vision. It's usually albines have I don't know if most monochromats are albines. I don't think that most albines are monochromatic, but this is rare. Most colorblinds are dichromatic, meaning they have a problem in one of the types of the cones. It can be any one of the three ones. I am an anomalous person in general, you probably realized already. And specifically also, I am an anomalous trichromatic, meaning I have all three kinds of cones, but one of them is fucked up. And there are people, and this is also rare, that they have different stuff, different composition of cones in the two eyes. Like one eye is colorblind, the other is not. I don't know how they perceive light. Probably, like me, they don't. I see the world in color. Everything is colorful, the world is beautiful, people are nice. But I sometimes cannot say, I mostly I can tell the color of things because I learned. But in some situations, I see a color that is colorful, I don't see black and white is colorful and saturated colors, but my perception is that it can be both two colors at the same time. So how does it happen? So a person with all the three types of colors, this person sees the Ishihara plate. This doesn't matter that it is the same by coincidence. So you have the three different things, a combination of reaction of the three of them. So the difference between some points that make the number inside. Do you see something here? Do you see anyone that is not colorblind? You see? What do you see here? 74? Really? Really? I see 21. I see 21 clearly. You also see, really? You see the 21 and you see, do you see the 74? You see both, okay. Okay, so the difference is that for some of those circles that make the 74 clear for most of you, I cannot see. Okay, makes sense? The 2, you cannot see these 2, but can you see the 4, Harry? Do you?
Yeah, I can see the 4 and 1 on the right side, but I cannot see the 2.
2. These 2. What? So these you guys see 74. What? Who sees what here? 21, 21. I don't see shit here. I don't see anything here. I see that there is some brighter stuff here, but I cannot see 21. Funny, yeah. There are some of them are even crazier. Some of them, and again, this is probably not the better because it's through the it's distorted through the digital coloring. But in the real ones, sometimes there is 7, and I see 84. Like there are. Okay, so this is something. This is so these are the 3 types of dichromatic colorblind. And someone tried to, this is I don't know, based on what, a simulation of what the three types of colorblind people see. I absolutely don't identify. My word is much more interesting than any one of these. I see all of them. I see even more. But whatever. We have 2 minutes. We made it. We made it. Who wants to try this one? Suppose you have two monochromatic lights, A and B, such that the intensity of A is double the intensity of B. For one pigment system shown on the right, the two lights will be. Assume that this is 25 and this is 50. Maybe it looks like 27 and 48, but assume this is 50 and this is 25. Yes, yes, we are done. So they will look the same. They will be exactly the same. Because this will be 25 times 250. 50 photons will bleach this receptor exactly like this, because this is A is double the intensity of B. All right. So it's C, yes? Questions. You want to try this one? The spectral power, the SPD of a light that reaches your eye from an object depends on the composition of the light, the composition of the surface, what it reflects, both or neither. C, both, right?